Some people believe that there is something out there, watching over us, guiding and keeping us safe from the evils that plague our planet. Whether they are thought to be angels, supernatural creatures, or spirits breaking through the walls that separate our realms, every culture has a legend or lore of some kind of guardian, shielding us from the dark. But to what extent would you personally go in order to protect the ones you love? Would anyone or anything be able to stand in your way if they were in danger? Could even the permanence of death prevent you from reaching out with a helping hand or a fist of anger? It's 1994 in Cabanatuan, a large bustling city known as the tricycle capital of the Philippines. Lila, a small but spirited 7-year-old girl, was living with her parents and 9-year-old sister, not too far from the Pampanga River. Her extended family lived all around them, having purchased a large plot of land together and built their own homes, taking over almost the entire street. The homes were all interconnected, with custom-covered bridge-style tunnels, making it easy for the families to move freely indoors. On the corner of the street was a bar that Lila and her cousins were not allowed to go near. The people who frequented the bar were not the family-friendly type. On the other side of the street was a swampy marsh, filled with tall, thin reeds, thick brown cattail plants blowing in the wind, and mysterious creatures known as the duende. They're small dwarf-like entities, thought to carry powerful magic. Lila, along with her sister and cousins, were told never to enter the swampy area, for it was the creature's home, and to accidentally step on or even offend the mystical beings meant a terrible curse of unusual disease on you or your family. Too scared to tempt fate, Lila and her sister kept their distance. Their cousin, on the other hand, allegedly did not listen to the warning. She was diagnosed with a rare bone cancer, which led to her legs swelling to an alarming size, causing her great pain. Many locals, and even some family members, were vocal about their belief that the girl had entered the swamp and stepped on one of the tiny yet powerful creatures residing within the muddy reeds. This kept most of the children and adults out of the area. Lila's home was tall for a 1-story house, with a large emerald green gate that led into the garage, connecting to the living room inside. The floor of their home was a bright maroon marble that accentuated the vivid abundance of floral patterns and Catholic decor. Lila's mother was a very religious woman and liked to display her devotion. In the dining room was a substantially sized painting of the Last Supper with abounding crosses scattered about the walls, as well as a carefully thought out and elaborate shrine of the nativity scene, celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Catholic figurines, decorative candles, and rosaries covered most other surfaces. Though the main part of the house was ornately decorated, Lila's parents' bedroom was especially plain. There was a small table for the TV and their respective beds. Her mother slept on a soft king-size bed, while her father slept on a queen-size, made of thick wood slats and a surprisingly thin pad. Only professionally taken, framed family pictures were hung from the walls of this room, keeping safe what was truly important. On occasion, Lila's parents would go out of town and hire a long-term babysitter. The woman was a trusted family friend, but was not liked by Lila and her sister, as she had a history of being unnecessarily rough with them. Little did she know, her reign of terror over the little girls would bring about her own downfall. One warm night, they were being watched over by the young woman when she decided it was time for the girls to go to bed. It was dark outside, but still early on in the night, so the rambunctious children were making things difficult for their sitter. She wanted to go next door to visit the girl's uncle, with whom she was romantically involved. The girls refused to listen to the woman, even as she began to chase them around the home. Then Annie grabbed a broom from the kitchen, continued her pursuit of the little siblings. now screaming that she was going to beat them if they didn't obey. The girls were terrified of what would happen if the angry nanny caught them, so they evaded her as best they could, jumping over the plastic-covered couch, crawling under tables, all while running as fast as their little legs could move. In the panic of being hunted, Lila's sister had scrambled outside. The furious sitter quickly shut the door, padlocked it, and stepped back. Lila saw this and yelled at the woman to let her sister back in, as it was way too dangerous for a young girl to be outside on the street at night. The sitter, feeling like she had won a part of the battle, refused. Lila screamed as loud as she could for the woman to give her the keys. She merely grinned at the child, and again rudely refused. Out of fear for her older sister, Lila let out an ear-shattering shriek. The woman shouted for her to stop, but Lila gave it all she had, forcing the sitter to give in. But in her anger and frustration, she threw the keys with force directly at Lila, hitting her in the forehead. Lila quickly grabbed the keys off the ground and ran to unlock the door. She could hear her sister banging on the door, demanding to be let in, while she opened the padlock. Finally, the door opened, and the two girls embraced.
"You're bleeding,"
Lila's sister said, looking concerned, then enraged.
"What?"
Lila replied, putting her small hand up to her forehead, feeling the warm blood drip onto her brow. Suddenly, her sister darted towards their temporary guardian and slapped her as hard as she could across the face, instantly realizing what she had done and becoming drastically more afraid. The woman, at first, just stared back at the little girl, in shock of the extreme disrespect she had just been shown, but soon her rage boiled over. She screeched at the two girls with a piercing growl, then lunged at them. The chase had resumed. The girls this time ran into their parents' room and took shelter under their mother's bed. Not far behind them, the woman chose to hop onto the bed and violently jump up and down, still screeching at the girls, who were now laying flat, holding each other and trembling. The aggressive movement forced the girls to crawl underneath their father's bed where there was more room. They made eye contact and saw the overwhelming fear in each other's eyes, embracing once more in their new shelter. In a flash, the thin pad above them was thrown across the room by the woman. There was only the slats between them now. The fury-driven nanny stepped onto the wood supports, glaring down at the petrified sisters. The sitter took a deep, grumbling breath in, then let out a demonic wail, while staring down at them through the gap in the slats. Just then, Lila felt a rush of calming peace sweep over her, overtaking the dread and alarm. She looked to the opening of their momentarily safe place, to see her grandfather sitting next to them. She was stupefied to see the old man she loved so dearly, as he had sadly passed away 6 months prior. Shockingly, she felt no confusion or fear, only tranquility and love. A feeling of calm enveloped them in a cocoon of safety. A white glow emanated from him as he smiled at his 2 young granddaughters. The sitter was still rampaging above them, but the girls felt no urgency when their luminescent grandfather reached up through the gap in the slats, grabbed the nanny's ankle, and pulled down with great force, before fading away. 2 of the slats broke, and the sitter's leg came plunging through the wood. The girls, somehow still in their state of serenity, slowly crawled out from underneath their father's bed and watched the sitter scramble and claw at her surroundings, trying to get free. When it was apparent she would get loose on her own, the 2 sisters walked quickly to their room, shut the door, and blocked it so she couldn't get in. The girls remained barricaded until their parents finally arrived home. When they heard their mother's voice, it was abruptly interrupted by the sitter frantically vocalizing her exasperation. The girls ran out to the living room to explain their side of the story. The sitter was yelling that the girls had hurt her on purpose. She claimed that they were the ones that pulled her leg through the strong wood supports. And then she showed Lila's parents a hideous, dark, hand-shaped bruise on her ankle. Lila interrupted that it was not them, then relayed how she had been viciously chasing them through the house, locking the older sister outside, then was chaotically jumping on the beds with the tiny girls underneath. She told her parents that's when the sitter's leg went through the supports. Lila then approached the assailant and put her hand over the gruesome contusion, showing that it was 3 times bigger than her child-sized hand. Lila's parents, knowing that the sitter had been sleeping with their family member next door, blamed the bruise on her activities with him, noting that it was the size of a man's hand. The sitter insisted she was attacked, but the parents of the little girls did not believe her. They sternly asked the woman, who had obviously traumatized their young girls, to leave and never return. Lila and her older sister made an agreement not to tell anyone what they had seen that night, as they were sure even their parents would think that they were crazy. That is, until years later, when Lila's grandmother had passed. Lila overheard her aunt telling her mother that she had seen the spirit of a relative. She was surprised by her mother's reaction to this news. Her very religious mother seemed to be open to the notion. This gave Lila the courage to finally tell her story. She recounted the series of events, and even more to her surprise, the woman who gave birth to her remembered that night, recalled the strangeness of the bruise on the nanny's ankle, and completely believed what she saw was real. Lila's sister even told her husband about her experience, and when the 2 sibling stories were compared, they matched perfectly, even though they hadn't spoken of it in decades. During our interview with Lila, she wanted to make it clear that even now, she knows that her grandfather's appearance and the feeling of security and warmth that he provided were not imaginary, but very real. She explained it as not a ghostly or angelic presence, but rather an assurance that her grandfather would always be there to protect her and her sister. What was it that Lila and her sister truly saw that night? Could it have been a hallucination shared between the young girls, brought on by the high stress of being chased by a violently crazed person? Was it possibly imagined later, in order to explain the chaotically mysterious circumstances of the night in question? But if it was a delusion of some kind, or even dreamt up by the adolescent girls, how was the sitter's leg pulled through the thick wood slats? And where did the gruesome, man-sized, hand-shaped bruise on her leg come from? Could it be connected to the mystical beings residing in the swampy marsh? Or might it have been precisely what Lila and her family believes, a cherished cornerstone of the family, protecting their own? If it truly was a spirit, piercing the imperceptible partition of the living and the dead, we have to wonder, what else can find its way through?